Welcome to the New Future of Work, a series brought to you by Harvey Nash and Spinks, where we talk to leading businesses, technologists and talent leaders from across the world and try and work out what work might look like when we get to the other side of this crisis that we're all facing. Today's episode, the third in the series, is all about an inclusive new world, and hopefully we can build one. To help me chat through that subject, we've got three great guests. We've got Kopp, who's the head of IT and regional office lead for Munich HQ within Microsoft. We've got Deacon, who's the former head of talent at Capita and is now an independent talent consultant. And finally, we've got Nicky Ivory-Chapman, head of talent acquisition at Channel 4. So joining me on the call, we have got a panel that are located in a number of different locations. We've got Germany and the UK represented here, so it's going to be fascinating to see how different attitudes around inclusivity match up possibly to different regions. And we are talking about an inclusive new world. David, I'd like to come to you for the first question, because when we think of new worlds, I think we immediately think of kind of the 15th or 16th hundreds and people kind of sailing across oceans and discovering new places. And unfortunately, those expeditions tended to end with minority populations not doing so well and inclusivity not being at the forefront of people's minds. And yet here we are sailing into a new world of virtual and digital. What do you think the biggest obstacles are going to be now in terms of building an inclusive world that really embraces diversity?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, Dave. Because you're right, the fact that we are now able to be remote and be involved in a conversation where we can see Anna in Germany as well as Nicky in London and you wherever you are, and you know, it's actually removing barriers, which is fantastic. And at least in theory, this takes us down a path which brings competence to the fore. So availability and frankly complexion should matter a lot less than competence and ability, because it can be delivered anyhow, anyway. So at least in theory, the fact that we can be in our bedrooms or dining rooms or kitchens or wherever is a good thing for, at least for diversity of thought, diversity of experience. But I do agree, being remote is almost a synonym with excluded. Because if we're remote, almost by definition, we are on our own. And if we are on our own, we don't have to choose to be exposed, and we can choose to ignore a whole bunch of influences and ideas and people, pieces of data, pieces of information, which we otherwise might get exposed to. So I think it's a really interesting balance between, yes, you can get a lot of voices, but all those voices are alone. And so the bridging from diversity to inclusion, I think that's almost a new skill. It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Nicky, I know that when we spoke prior to this recording, you were worried that the main levers of industry around inclusion and diversity were stuck. Just listening and building on what David was saying there, do you kind of have further views on that?
Yeah, it's a real worry for me, actually, because I think the economic situation could potentially take us back on diversity, which is a real worry for me as a recruiter and as an HR professional. And I think this move to the digital world and working virtually, by the very nature of that, I think that we lose some inclusivity in that. I think it brings things, good things, it takes them away. Because when I think about people working in an office environment, there's a degree of consistency there. Everybody has a desk, people have a chair, people have the laptop, they're working on the same broadband speed. And I think what I've seen as we've been now working remotely is people are having very different experiences dependent on their home setup. It might be an age thing, it might be a demographic thing. And actually I'm seeing it's not such a level playing field anymore. And people are often really struggling because of lack of space, lack of quietness. Broadband speed and connection as well is a huge hindrance. So I'm seeing things maybe a little bit more negatively at the moment, but I'm hoping that the positives will outweigh the negatives in the longer term.
Just on that point of consistency, I suppose, and this is entirely my own failing, but I think when I think of diversity and inclusion, I tend to kind of probably package it up in a way that is very much framed by the conversations that I have with the people around me. Anna, I know when we were talking as well, you were talking about the fact that you're working in a global organization like Microsoft, but what diversity and inclusion means to Germany isn't what diversity and inclusion necessarily means to the States, and obviously your American colleagues. Does not only that consistency of the environment, but the consistency of how the organization views this subject, is that an issue?
It is even more important now when you are global because of the let's take time zones. Great example. You get an invite and for a call late in the evening, and when you speak to employees, very often they had to be on a call by 9, and I have a trick how to solve that. You say no. And they don't like doing that. And very often it is you have to point out and not just say, no, I'm sorry, the call is too late. That sounds like you're not going the extra mile. And then you're finding like you're excluding yourself. But if you say, thank you for the invite. Unfortunately, this call is eating into my family time. Can we try to find another time together that suits all of us? That shows that you want to be included, but you're also, reaching out your hand for inclusion. And it's amazing how very often it just happens. Oh yeah, all right, yeah, time zones. Didn't think of that. It's the basics for collaboration and inclusion is that you at least consider where someone is and when they are, aside from all the other diversity and inclusion topics that we have.
If you're not on that call, if for whatever reason the time zones don't work out and you're excluded, I suppose the communication piece becomes that much harder, and it's really hard at the minute because I suppose if you have skills in person, you know how to influence people. Influencing people online is hard, and you might not be very forward at saying, actually, no, I need that meeting to be at a time when I can take part and I can voice my opinion. David, just kind of riffing on that, what communication skills do you think people need to make sure that they're heard in this new world that we're all confronted with?
Yeah, it is hard because it's the same problems as we used to have in the workplace previously, just now digitally, virtually, and remotely. And so if you're excluded from a call, you don't even necessarily know that the call is taking place to know that you need to reach out to someone to say, hey, please include me in that. So it's the same skills, right? It's the same way, whether it's virtual or actual, of getting yourself in the flow, creating visibility, creating the necessity to be involved and included. And that is really hard to do. And it is easier, I think. It's not an answer to your question. But one of the advantages of being in an office space is that you can bump into people. And sometimes, you all know this, you can engineer accidentally bumping into someone. You can spend a lot of time hanging around the kitchen just in order to bump into the CEO. And it helped, right? You can manage your own visibility to an extent. The Teams thing is fantastic, but you have to be invited. You can't just pop in and pop up. So yeah, I think the skills of marketing yourself, marketing your contribution, your value, your thought leadership, all of those things are probably accelerating. And it's been both fun and appalling to watch people on LinkedIn in particular. As we've gone through this sort of lockdown period, I feel as though we've seen the best and the worst of people's attempts to self-publicize. And I don't know what the opposite of tone deaf is. It's sort of, I guess it's sort of tone alert or something. But I do think people have demonstrated how successfully to damage their reputation and to increase their likely exclusion by the way that they've tackled making themselves relevant and visible and important. There's a real skill, art actually, to this. So there's probably a whole book in that somewhere, because I don't know if we have the rules written yet, but it's I'm pretty sure it's a thing.
Communication's a meaty subject. I can see that both Anna and Nicky are keen to kind of come into the conversation. We'll head over to Anna first.
Yeah, totally agree with you, David. There's so many aspects of it. On one hand, what I want to comment in the beginning was, technology can kind of help you knowing when to be where. I think we all need to drive, and this is for management to do. Transparency. Is this an important meeting where 3 top shot speakers are going to talk about the vision and the strategy of the company, where there's no dialogue? And saying, already pointing out at the beginning, this meeting will be recorded, so that we all work in our car, right? My car is, my office as well as my home office. And I can listen to it to the next day. So that's kind of how I can keep on track with what I need to know. If it's a one-to-one meeting, very often, if no others are involved, then that's when you can negotiate when's a good time. The other point that you made now about the skills, that is something we all need to proactively probably start working on ourselves. Not just using the actual meeting technology, but things like, LinkedIn is a great one, or Yammer. How can I make myself more visible? Can I go out and find a coach even? And for HR companies, I think, or HR departments now, to start looking at what do my employees need in terms of coaching and training. And it's no longer just the technical stuff you need to know. You need to know how to sell yourself, how to present online on video. I mean, a lot of people have never been on video and feel, see myself there and I look weird and I talk weird. And I think, those kind of skills in HR is going to be programmatically growing more and more. And that's what companies need to spend time on.
Yeah, and I was just going to talk really about the importance of managers and the skills that they need, because it is different managing teams in this world. And they probably need to rely on facilitation skills that they've maybe not used before, or maybe not even been trained in. So we're finding communication needs to be more frequent, but it needs to be shorter, needs to be snappier. So I think everybody has to maybe get a little bit more direct with their questioning, because you're not able to pick up on those kind of body language or the cues where if you were speaking to one of your team face to face, often some team members, they never put their video on, and that could be for a variety of reasons, and it often doesn't feel appropriate to question why. So in that case, you've got to really use questioning to understand and check in how people are doing, how people are feeling. So I think there's a big shift for managers as well in this current climate that we're having to work in.
Just on managers, whilst we're talking about managers, it was put to me yesterday that managers are going to become so much more important to an organization, because they are the touch point now, for teams, in a way that before there was an environment and there were other employees around them, and there were all the other kind of trappings of an organization that kind of made management a bit easier, perhaps, because you had backups in regards to other managers and people above you. Now, if it's over Teams and it's virtual, managers could account for 80% of the time that any employee is spending with that kind of contact with the organization. Are managers skilled enough to ensure that the workplace is inclusive? Do they know what they're looking for? I managed a team of 10 or 11 at one point, and I think I would struggle in the current environment. I don't know, Nicky, whether you want to come back on that. Obviously, you were talking about it a minute ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes as you progress in your career and you get older, you can often very easily forget what it's like to be a more junior member of staff, or a different stage in your career. And we're doing quite a bit of training at the moment with managers that seems quite basic on the face of it, but it's quite easy to get absorbed in your own world. particularly at the moment when some people are working harder than ever and there's additional childcare pressures, elder care pressures, that actually having that focus to try and put yourself in the mindset of your employees is really, really important. And again, with this home working, it goes back to some of the, I guess, the kind of basic principles about people are sharing houses. So they're working in very different environments. And I think as a manager, we often just need to remind ourselves to try and put ourselves in other people's shoes, because it's very easy to forget when you're very, very busy and dealing with pressures yourself.
I mean, managers themselves are dealing with pressures, and they're probably scared. They've got teams who are furloughed. They might be worried if they might end up getting furloughed, or what the long-term situation for a business might be going forward. If they've relied upon control because they've not been able to necessarily let go and trust their staff as much as they might have done previously, how can we help minimize those people's fears, the managers' fears, to make sure that they are trusting and do manage appropriately now? I mean, I'd be keen to know what either David or Anna think about this, because I know both of you have views on it. But David, maybe if I come to you first.
I think it's a brilliant question. And I do think the technology is exposing, not the technology, that's not fair. The challenge of leading remotely is exposing poor managers for being really poor managers. And I've long had a complaint that in our organizations we've let average to poor managers just continue going. A manager has to be really, really bad at their job before we have actually in some way intervened. And so most of us, most of the time, have worked for managers who are not particularly good at managing us. And this has accelerated that. It's made it worse because, to your point, your manager is the person that you're even more reliant on now than you were before. Almost all the connectivity and connection, information flow, opportunity to share and speak, all of that exists with and through your manager. So a great manager is being magnified and multiplied, and that's fantastic because the chances are she's doing great work, and that's wonderful for the people who work for her. But poor managers are similarly being magnified and multiplied, and we have a greater challenge, I think, because we won't see that. We won't know. And you can, sometimes if you're lucky, you can spot it in an office environment, or there's opportunities for hints or something. There is no opportunity for any of us to be aware of a team that's doing badly unless there's data which we can track, or we're really patient and look at the lagging indicators and finally take action. But that's a really bad way. It's a really old school way of doing it. So I think we're going to have to start measuring the effectiveness of managers and the, for want of a better word, happiness of teams much more frequently, much more creatively, much more interactively than we have ever had to before.
Anna, you seem keen to come in.
Yeah, because that's awesome. What you're saying that, because we are just looking this, right now on exactly that, the data. There's technology that, for example, so it's our technology, and it's something called the Manager Insights dashboard, which just takes system flags. For example, a manager get a pop-up, or they go to their dashboard and saying, you don't have a one-on-one with any of your employees this month. Maybe you would like to consider, you should consider making sure you reach out to them. Or something, it's called workplace analytics, where you can get dashboards saying how, for example, when people start working from home more, we heard that I used to have time for stuff, and now instead of having any time for focus time, I just collaborate more. And I saw some dashboards saying 43% increase in collaboration, meaning you're more on calls and less time for work. So there is technology that can gather that data to help manage it, because very often you just have to point it out and they go, oh yeah, right, because we're all caught up in our daily work. And that is the data side. So there's technology for that, and it's pretty cool. You get great insights. There's a second methodology, super straightforward, satisfaction surveys. We run them. I think most companies you do that, custom or employee satisfaction. And it's not just about getting the survey, but picking out those top 3 things and really action and work on them, what you need. But the other thing is, with the skills, it's something that when I speak to managers or customers, is skilling and training. Yeah, but that costs money. It's like, yeah, you're going to need to invest in skilling. And one of the things are helping managers deal and work in this environment. Well, how do you coach when you're only doing video? And how do you work with distributed teams to make sure everyone feels like part of the team, have fun together? There's a lot of things you can do. And online trainings is a good measure for that too. So it's kind of connecting technology and what we can do, but you have to think of it. You have to go out and do it. And most importantly, you have to realize that you need to invest there. Mm-hmm. It's something that skilling and learning, yes, it costs money, and you got to do it, because if you don't do it, someone else does. And the companies that do are going to get, the best employees, because it's a war for talent out there, and we all want the best people to, come and work in our teams, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, I love the fact that you've used the phrase the war for talent, because we are about to head into a fairly significant economic dip, crisis of some form or other, and yet there are some categories of talent that are going to be even more highly sought after than they have been up until now, because we're going to feel as though the route to future success will be, I think, significantly accelerated by our technology talent, and probably, given it's a crisis, our financial talent. And so you can kind of see that we're going to be, whilst there will be relatively high unemployment, sadly, across many economies across the world, there will also be a war for talent. And the way that our leaders and managers address that and treat people and create, because here's the other thing with all of this, how do you create a climate, a culture for an organization that is attractive and sticky and keeps people feeling a strong sense of purpose and drive and commitment, when you can't bring them into an office space, or at least not very often, and you're very dependent on the relationship between the manager, who is often not very good at this, and the employee base. I mean, it's a whole new problem. We've kind of taken culture for granted, and we've said, okay, well, we probably need to change some things, so we'll have a program. I don't think that's going to cut it anymore. I think we're going to need to address the projection of the culture of our organizations quite differently in this remote world.
If we run with this a little bit, Nicky, if I could turn to you, organizations previously could physically move to change their culture, or they could embrace diversity, because in the case of Channel 4, maybe you felt that London was a certain type of individual, socio-demographic wise. Maybe it was a type of individual in terms of skill sets, but a physical move up to Leeds, that gave you the opportunity to hit the reset button to think about your culture. And now, it doesn't matter whether you're in London or Leeds, you're in your living room, you're in your kitchen, you're in your wherever it is, and surely the physical thing's kind of gone. So how do you replicate that and be able to hit the refresh button and also address some of those concerns that David has around culture?
And do you know what? And I actually don't have the answers to that. I think, we went through this amazing process. I mean, this timing just couldn't have been worse, of, really engaging the regions, planning out our investment, the symbolic move of opening in Leeds, Bristol and Glasgow. And then within 6 months, this happens. I guess if I'm looking for a positive, what it has done is enable the organisation to move to that multi-site mindset much quicker, because we've still got a London office, so there's always still going to be some legacy, people deviate, that must be the HQ, And we were still finding our ways of how do we think differently? How do we ensure that we can operate multi-site? Because we'd not done it for 36 years. So this has actually really forced the issue, because no one's in a building. Doesn't matter where you are, we're all sort of working in the same way. So the positive is that it's actually moved us on. It's concertinaed the journey we probably would have gone through over the next 12 months. We've done it in 2. But I don't have the answer to that kind of culture piece. It's a really difficult one. I mean, we're lucky we've got a pretty strong culture anyway, that kind of holds true, and will just, I guess, sort of change a little bit with the times.
David, you're keen to jump in.
I have 2 suggestions. One of which is send gifts. By which I mean, I think it would be really helpful for us all to have branded culture supporting stuff around us. So it almost doesn't matter what it is, but, you know, drinks mats or do you remember when we used to all have branded stress balls? I feel like we all need branded stress balls back on our home desks, wherever those home desks are. You almost need stuff around you that reminds you of your connection to the entity, rather than just your connection to your team that you interact with. So I think there's a huge market now for innovative, interesting, unusual gifts, and I think employers should be sending this stuff to all remote employees frequently. You know, you should be delighted when a new crazy thing arrives on your doorstep. So I would say send gifts, but probably more seriously, we have to get comfortable with talking about culture. I actually think we have to take a leaf out of the book of some of the big tech companies that have scaled up, Netflix being the most famous example. We have to talk about the culture that we have and the culture that we want. And it just has to be not assumed, but overt and deliberate and out there for everyone to engage with and discuss and debate.
Just quickly on that point then, Anna, in Germany, you had this document. Is this, sorry, just to make sure I've got this right, and for anyone watching, was this a specific Microsoft German document, the Workplace of Trust and Work Hours of Trust, that was signed in 2014?
It's a so-called Works Council usage agreement under what terms that we are operating. And
right.
We decided to, there was a time we had our PC under our table and there was a big monitor, and then, technology allows that we can work from anywhere. So we defined, that this is possible and how that's going to work. And then we implemented it and we had this agreement signed. And what happened? Nothing. Workplace of Trust. Because we didn't live it yet, and it's about change management and change management. So number one is leading by example. So I told you the story, where you can come when you want to, you can leave when you want to, and then I took over a team, and I was sitting in the evenings and thinking, why are they still here? Well, it's because your new boss is there, and if I don't go home, they're not going to go home because they don't know me yet. So it's a lot about, establishing that culture yourself. And it has to be clear. It has to be transparent. I love when people talk about their work styles. My work style is I don't do 7 a.m. Some people come late, some hand off their kids in the morning and come in. And the worst thing you can say here in Germany and in our company is this old kind of joke. Do you have a part-time job when someone leaves at 5? The stupid thing, yeah? Is that you don't say that because you respect your work style, my work style. You come early, I leave early, yeah? Because you never see when someone comes early and everyone works for a couple of hours because they enjoy having that peace and quiet in the morning. So leading with example and having that work style transparency up until even having a one-pager explaining your work style. I have a family. I don't have a family. I'm single. I love programming all night through and drinking Red Bull. Yeah, that's okay. This is my work style. So kind of a work style agreement and here is my overall motto. And I'm saying a culture of work style culture of okay, it's okay. Your style is okay. My style is okay. It's okay. And let's talk about it and be courageous as well, because very often we're trying, and this is my last point, trying to kind of hide. Why aren't we honest and saying, I'm having a super bad day. I need retail therapy now, meaning shoes, and I'll be back online, and because I need to do my job, no one does it for me, and being quite, courageous. First time I said that to my teams, like, I just need to go and do something else for a couple of hours. I'll be online from tonight. And they were like, what? So courageous, leading with example, and transparency.
As a last question, Nicky, I'd probably come to you because it'd be interesting to see if you have any ideas on this. Technology tends to be something that helps people who already have money, have access to data, have access to tech, can get online. There's plenty of research around the fact that people from areas of high poverty, they have trouble getting online. We've already seen that there's going to be an economic impact around schemes such as apprenticeship programs and graduate programs that we mentioned right at the beginning of this debate. Those levers are stuck. So if tech is good for the white collar middle class workers and isn't so good for people who need opportunities and need a leg up, and those opportunities are narrowing, how do we make sure that they don't get locked out of society and opportunity?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of research being done about the digital divide globally and in the UK, and I know it's a key factor of government strategy because it impacts people in schools as well as people who want to get in the workplace. And we know that actually that's just going to be exacerbated with the younger generations. If they're not in homes where they have access to technology, they're going to fall behind. But there are some real positives from technology. And I think about, the industry that I work in. 10 years ago, you couldn't, as a young person from anywhere, you couldn't create your own content and have it seen by people. So the technology has actually become an enabler for people who would never have got into TV because they didn't know the right people. Their parents didn't work at the BBC and they didn't have those connections. But now you've got, young people from really diverse backgrounds who are just going, I'm going to create this content myself. And some of them have gone on to have incredibly successful careers with their own chat shows on terrestrial TV, documentary makers, etc., films, young indie filmmakers. So there is an advantage, I think, in terms of access that people can have, but we need to close this digital divide because it's going to be a huge impact for the workforce of the future.
A last point from David before we bring this to an end.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question. I used to work for MasterCard, and one of the things that MasterCard was really good at doing was pursuing financial inclusion, meaning bringing the most disadvantaged people around the world onto the electronic payments networks. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's a really good thing, mainly for them as individuals, mainly because it reduces their exposure to theft and violence and extortion, and just most bad things are done with cash or to get cash, and you actually can't do those things if there's an electronic store and an electronic record of value. So there's a lot of really good case studies, digital food, lots of use of sort of prepaid cards. The point being, the reason why it was possible was because regardless of all of the deprivation, everyone has a cell phone, everyone has a mobile phone. And it was actually possible to place value into essentially an electronic wallet on a phone, even in the most poverty-struck areas of the world, to help people get access to the funds that you wanted to give them, and to cut out all the kind of middlemen and fraudsters and all the rest in the middle of that value chain. So I think it's a really interesting question. The good news, as Nicky says, there is good news about having access to technology, even in the most deprived parts of the world. I think we have an obligation in the developed nations to work out how to help people take maximum advantage of the fact that they do have digital access, at least to some extent. whether that's how we distribute healthcare knowledge, or how we distribute access to new ways of working, or new ways of distributing their own labor in return for payment. I don't know what the answers are, but I think we have an obligation to help them leverage that access.
Look, we could talk about this subject, I think, for quite some time, but unfortunately we are out of time. And I think that those two positive points from David and Nicky is certainly a nice place to finish on. I want to thank each of you, David, Nicky and Anna, for joining us on this session. I want to thank UHubs for hosting us. They've got plenty of immersive and live interactive masterclasses on their platform, so check that out. And of course, thank you for tuning into the Future of Work series. This is one of 5 episodes that we are releasing all at once, Netflix style, so you can binge away into your heart's content on them. So please do check out the other episodes. And as a final piece of content that you can digest, James Lawson, one of the directors at the Harvey Nash Group, will be producing a sister podcast to the series, diving into some of these topics and subjects in a bit more detail. So make sure you check that out. But thank you all for your time today.